Alright, I'm going to make a quick video just to talk about how to create the body of our operation game. Now, what I'm going to talk about in this video is specifically because there's a few tools I wanted to show that you can use when making your operation body or your case that you might not have used before, even if you've used Fusion or Adobe Illustrator. But let's just jump right into this. So once again, the design for the case of our operation game. So I got my file here. So here I've got my design for what I'm going to make as the example operation game. But one thing I'm missing is I don't really have any design engraved on here, which you totally can. If you wanted to add a design, I'll show you how afterwards, but let's just talk about how this is built. So, as I mentioned, these four things right here, these shapes, these are the pieces that you're going to pull out while you're playing the game. So you're going to use the tweezers to try and get the P, try and get the T, the C, and the Trailhawk logo out of the hole without touching the rim. Now, a few considerations for your shapes. One, keep in mind we're going to have to use copper tape to line the holes. So if you have like super intricate holes, it might be very difficult for you to get the copper tape surrounding that hole to look nice. Nice, simple, large shapes like these big letters, or even the Trailhawk might be a little difficult, but likely doable. These are okay because there's not too many intricate details. And then down here, I've got my components. So I've labeled them. Here's a hole for my 2-terminal switch. Here's a hole that my buzzer is going to sit inside of, and here's an LED, or a hole for my LED. All of these terminals are going to mount either from the bottom in these two cases or from the top. It all depends on how the component is mounted. So you're going to have to go pick out you're going to have to go pick out the components that you want to use for your project, measure them, and create the holes to mount them as you want. I'm going to point one other thing out before I start actually building this to show you how I put it together, which is this square here and this hole here. Now there's one other component, or one other thing that we have for our operation game, which I wanted to make a mount for on the board, which is our tweezers. This hole I'm either going to use just to stick the tweezers in while I'm not playing, or I might try 3D printing a little clip to stick in the hole that will actually hold the tweezers kind of parallel here. So I've put it there to give myself some options as to how I want to build this project. And then this little hole here I've included because we're going to have to run a wire from inside the game outside and attach to our tweezers. So there's one more little addition that I've added. Okay, let's get into building this. So as we can see, I started out with a border. This is going to cut out our piece on the laser and give us a nice border to work with for our overall project. For this, I used a rectangle, and with the rectangle tool, there's two ways of using it. You can either click and hold and then drag to create a shape, but I prefer to just single click. So you just click and we get this window that pops up that allows us to actually punch in specific dimensions. Because most of the designing we do is for components, for projects, I like to be specific. So I suggest you find a nice size to fit all of your components on the outside as well as the inside, and design to that. One more consideration for lining up our components here is on the inside of this, we're going to need to mount our batteries. It just has to be a consideration. Again, a big part of this project is your designing for it. I'm just giving you the tools of how to design it. Okay, back to our outline. I've kind of, after measuring all of my components, figured out that 140 and by 200 makes a nice sized rectangle. This is small enough that we can print a body for it on the 3D printer, but not so small that these pieces are going to be tiny and hard to get out. So I made my border. The next thing I went with was our PTC. Text is really easy. we go over here to our type menu, select our type tool, and we just click. And then I put caps lock on, type PTC, go over up here, and I'm going to switch over to my selection tool. I'm just gonna click and drag, and now something you don't see because it's on the computer or my keyboard, I'm holding shift as I drag, and you see how the proportions of the letters are locked in place? By holding shift, it locks those proportions. If I let go of shift, now it screws up the proportions. So I normally try and keep the proportions proportionate and locked together. It's totally up to you if you wanted to, if you think it looks better like that or something. I just prefer like that, but just a little shortcut. Okay, make it bigger, and now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go over to my font or my typeface. I want to pick a nice thick typeface so that we get a nice big object or a nice big hole for our object. Something to consider is we don't want something like this because it's not going to give us a solid outline. It's not a solid body. This might be good. I'm just going to scroll through until I found one that I like. Now I've got some custom fonts on here that I've downloaded. Feel free to look them up and download them. Let's see. This one would be good. So I've got a nice thick font I'm going to use. It's a good size. The next thing we're going to do is come down to our quick actions. We're going to select this create outlines, which changes our text from a editable text to shapes with outlines. I'm going to hit ungroup, and now these are individual objects that are not considered letters anymore, or not considered a word. They're just considered shapes made of points and lines. I'm going to arrange them how I want them on my board here, and we're good. Okay, so the next step here is we have to prepare these for laser cutting. Now, I believe I mentioned it in class, but in order for something to be cut, I'll just select this box here, it has to have this value of 0.1 pt, stands for point. Giving it this specific, what we call stroke value, our board outline, our stroke value of 0.1, allows our laser to recognize it as a line that needs to be cut. So you can notice everything that I want to cut out is 0.1. Everything I want to engrave, however, has no stroke. It just has a fill. Now, as long as that stroke isn't 0.1, it's going to engrave, but I find it safer just to have no stroke, only use fill for the things I want to engrave, and use 0.1 for the stuff I want to cut. Okay, so back to building this. I've got my letters where I want them on my board. And I'll bring that one down a little bit. Now, things I'm looking for here, making sure there is enough space between the letters that is not going to be crowded getting them out. Making sure they're far away from the edge, nice and even. That looks good. Got them where I want them. Now we're going to create this outline. This is the same tool that we're going to use to make our body in Fusion, at least how I'm going to show you to make the body. And what we're going to use is called a offset path tool. Now, before we can treat this as a path, we have to go over here and hit release. Now we see this quick actions option, offset path. I'm going to click on that and go over here, and I'm going to manually input my offset. So if you think about how we play Operation, the offset is going to basically be how you determine whether or not the component will be easy to get out or hard to get out. I'm going to put about a 4mm offset, but as we can see, when I change that number, the offset, this outline shape that's being created around our original shape is getting smaller or larger. Now I think 4 will be a nice challenging size, but not too easy, so I'll leave it at that. And you can play with these other things, the miter joints and whatnot, but that's kind of the edges. I normally just leave it as is, but feel free to play around with these programs. I'm gonna go OK, and now I select it, and again going back to that stroke, turn my fill off, add a color to my stroke, and then change this to 0.1. Okay, and now I've got my C. I'm not going to show the other ones in detail. However, that is how you're going to copy paste for this. So take a moment, pause the video, get caught up to this point, and then I'll continue on with the next step. Alright, so I showed you how to do a letter using our text tool. You can also make these shapes using our shape tools, and that whole offset path routine or technique, the tools, is exactly what you're going to do for whatever shapes you create in Adobe Illustrator. But what if you wanted to pull out a shape from the internet? I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. So I'll pull my menu over here. Once you've downloaded your object, as we can see, I'm using a PNG file for this explanation, but it works with PNG, JPEG, even PDF. Anything that will open in Adobe Illustrator you can do this with. So I'm going to click and drag it into my page. I've got my Trailhawk here. We're going to do what's called an image trace. Now, image tracing is basically the computer is going to recognize what is in this image and try and turn it into a vector, being points and lines, like all of the things we create in Illustrator. So I'll select here. It should be under Quick Actions. Click Image Trace. You're going to get this drop down. You could hit default, but because we're trying to just create silhouettes, I find the best one for this is going to be the black and white logo. Okay, we've hit black and white logo. It's produced this. If you're happy with it, we hit expand. And now it's an object. First thing we do before we can start editing this is hit ungroup. And I'm going to go in and just delete the background. That's the first step. The second step is to create this or turn this into one object. So I'm going to click and drag and select the whole image. And I come over here to my modify tool. We're going to use a tool called Shape Builder for this one. Now, all we have to do is, as long as we've got all those objects, we just click and drag over each object that we want to add to our shape. And here we see we get a solid object. I'm going to give this a stroke color, turn the fill off, 0.1, arrange it on my board, and there we go. There is my extra piece. Then once again, I'll go over here, offset path, 4 millimeters. Now I might actually talk about the joins, like the miter limit here, because we can see our shapes getting a little wonky here. What you can do is try bevel or round, looks like that. Bevel looks like that. Round looks nice. You can also play around with our miter limit, so sometimes changing that will allow some of this to look better. Doesn't seem to be working. Round seems to look nice, so I'll go with that. We have a nice outline for a Trailhawk here. One last thing I'll mention here is just, let's say I wanted this to still have the engravings or the logo design engraved on it. What we could do, I'll pull this image back into here. What we could do is, instead of just creating a silhouette, you could do that whole image trace, black and white, expand, and you could just leave it like this. Group that, size it up inside the whole, oops. So select the whole thing, group it, size it inside the whole. You could leave it as that, which might actually look nice, and I think I will do that. If you want to do this way, it's probably going to be a lot quicker to just create the first silhouette, create your outline, and then add in this afterwards. But again, I'm just showing you the tools you can do with this as you will. Okay, Now the last piece is down here are holes for our components. I'm just going to recap real quick how to create dimensioned holes. I'm not going to give you the dimensions because I want you to measure these things. But let's say for my buzzer, you'd select a rectangle, and let's say I measured it and the units or the measurements are 25 by 40, which they aren't, I don't believe. Let's say they were. You would single click, type in your dimensions, hit OK. Rotate it, or whatever you want, however you want it on your board. Again, making sure we have that 0.1 stroke. And I always like to turn the fill off, even though it probably doesn't matter. And then there you go, there's your buzzer. You're gonna do this for your buzzer, your switch, your LED. Once again, you can put it on here, you can put it on other areas of your case as long as it's mounted somewhere. So that is pretty much it for the Adobe Illustrator part of this. Once you're done this, you're just gonna file save as. Make sure we save it to our Creative Cloud. This way when we log in on the computers attached to the lasers, we can just access it straight from there. We need to save, and there we go. So there will be a part 2 to this video that talks about the base, or the other part of the case for this that being created in Fusion. So check out part 2 for the rest of that.